Today we are joined by Chad Prinkey. He is the founder and CEO of WellBuilt Construction Consulting, which is an organization that serves general contractors, construction managers, specialty contractors, owners, and developers in the building industry. Thanks so much for joining today, Chad.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me. Appreciate it.
Today, I just wanted to jump right into it. We're talking about how and why construction businesses stall and how they can overcome it. And I think that inevitably probably begins with the foundation a contractor has laid for their company at the start, which is something you talk quite a bit about in your book. What are those key elements you would say that a contractor needs to have in place in order to set them up to grow and grow successfully?
Yeah, to me, the big topic for your solid foundation is clarity, and it starts with financial clarity. And then it's clarity into every facet of your business so that you're able to monitor what is happening in the field, up into the project management role, up into pre-con and estimating, up into sales and business development. Really, that whole chain. And I use the word clarity very intentionally to just say it's not that all of those things have to be running perfectly for you to be successful. It's that if you don't have visibility into what's happening in each of those areas of your business, you really ought not to be doing much else until you gather clarity on that spot, because then you won't know what's broken, you won't know what your risks are. And that financial clarity is like kind of the ultimate piece of the foundation, because if you do not understand if you're being profitable project to project and on the whole, if your definition of are we okay or not is determined just by looking at the bank account from day to day, it's an extremely high risk proposition to grow your business. And so in the book, I very specifically say, and call out, do not do anything else until you have clarity in these functions. And so that clarity is accomplished with good tools and measurements, but it's also accomplished with just excellence in communication and meetings inside your organization, and establishing a solid culture of clarity, transparency, no hiding, and confronting the facts as they really are.
Yeah. And I know that you talked about knowing your numbers. There's a lot of numbers to know. What are the right, or like the most important numbers that contractors need to be looking at, or the most important metrics that they need to kind of have a pulse on all the time so that they know how they can focus on what really matters?
I guess I'll start with some essentials, and then we can get into like some nice to know. But the essentials, you need to know what your actual gross profit is on every project, and you have to be able to compare that to your estimated gross profit. Being able to monitor gain and fade as a percentage on projects and then on the whole will help you to understand if you're estimating correctly and make corrections there. It'll help you to understand if your managers are doing the right things on projects, depending on if you self-perform. And I know you mentioned that you have a lot of general contractor members in your audience, so I don't know how much self-performing there is going on there. But that gross, to me, gross profit is kind of the king of numbers. And gross profit as a percentage of revenue needs to be on target, but also gross profit as a dollar amount needs to be on target. And we could do a whole episode on the difference between GP, as a percentage and GP dollars. Actually taking a note, I might run that on my podcast. It sounds like a good topic. So gross profit, and always in relation to estimated gross profit, so that you can start to decode what's really happening in your business. That gives you a chance, if you're able to monitor gross profit through the course of the project, it gives you a chance to take action and get things corrected on a project before it is too far gone. The lagging indicator, the mother of all lagging indicators, is net profit. And net, or profit from operations, PFO, or net operating income, NOI. All these are different sort of things that when I say profit, I don't mean also from your investments and other items. I mean profit specifically from operations. And that is, I call it a lagging indicator, which in my book gets into this in more detail, but this is a number that really represents everything that you've done leading up to that point. I liken it to being on a scale. When you get on the scale, there's nothing you can do about what that number is telling you, short of like taking off your shirt, right? Or dropping your phone and being like, there, that had to be 3 pounds. Everything that got you there is what you need to really be measuring. And this is where the nuances vary from sector to sector. And, if you're a GC versus if you're a self-performing contractor versus if you're a sub that subs, right? And all these different kinds of metrics. But I will share a couple of my favorites with you in terms of leading indicators. These are the things that if we monitor, the scale will likely say the right number at the end. I'm a particular fan of monitoring gross profit per hour. That's both management hour and man hour. For a man hour, it tends to be relatively easy if you're a self-performing contractor to produce this number. How many man hours do we have on the project? How much gross profit have we generated on the project? What is our gross profit per man hour? That starts to tell me not just how much money I'm making on this job, but how much money I'm making relative to the number of resources that I've applied to this job, which the fewer resources I'm able to apply and the more money I'm able to generate per resource is an interesting data point. And it's something that helps me to price more aggressively and more conservatively depending on the project. Instead of just applying like a blanket X% gross profit, I can start to focus on gross profit per my estimated labor. And in labor, if you're a general contractor or a CM, that's not self-performing, that's your superintendent, that's your project manager, project engineer, assistant PM, and so on. And so I like that as a metric. Another leading indicator, and then I'll shut up. Another leading indicator of success is, as you work through the sales chain, I like estimating volume per week, dollars at number of estimates per week that we're putting out. All of these, by the way, I should throw a caveat, qualified estimates, because it's easy to put paper out on the street, but I want to know how many estimates met our target criteria for work that we actually want to pursue. And I'll even roll that one layer up and say, what are the things that lead to us doing estimates? Well, it'd be like new relationship discovery meetings with new potential customers. How many of those are we holding on a monthly basis? How many existing client meetings are we holding to talk about the future and things along those lines? And all these are things that, in my experience, if you establish goals for and you measure your activity toward the goal, even if you don't sell anything today, or even if you don't close out on a project today, you can call today a success if you did the things that you know will lead to success in the future. And this is culturally what we work very hard with our contractor client, with all of our clients who are all contractors, to implement.
Right. You mentioned something about at the very start of that, you mentioned gross profit kind of being like the North Star metric, the main metric that they're going after. I think we talked a lot in Crew Cost about how people lose track of or lose control of that margin, of the margin that they're getting on jobs. Where do you find that contractors kind of lose control of that, and how do they get that back?
So it's easy to blame the estimating department. And so I will. I do think there are a lot of mistakes made in estimating that operations staff are left to recover. Now that we have that one out of the way, which is the low-lying, right, no low-hanging fruit, mismanagement is just endemic in most small to mid-sized construction companies. I think this, in some ways, is correlated to growth. Very common to see contractors succeed in growing revenue and fail in growing gross profit alongside revenue, but instead experience a dip in gross profit as they grow. Why? Often because they don't have standard operating procedures. They don't have robust systems that allow them to easily manage their work. They don't have enough leaders in positions to effectively supervise that work. And when you think about what happens for contractors as they're growing their operation, typically what's happening is the most competent people that got the business to where it was a year ago, 2 years ago, even today, are almost by definition of growth getting a little bit more removed from the work that's being put in place on a daily, weekly basis. And so you have a mismanagement crisis that for us all goes into growth readiness assessment. 9 times out of 10, the reason that people reach out to us is they want to grow their business. And probably of those 9 times, 5 of those 9 times, we have to break some bad news once we do an assessment of their organization. And we say, look, if you grew right now, which is, I know what you really, really want to do, and the opportunities are there to do it or whatever. But if you grew right now, you would create more pain than pleasure for your business. Mm-hmm. And you need to get these things in place so that you don't end up with mismanagement, because there's nothing more painful than taking on double the risk and bringing home the exact same profit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where do you find that those, when you have companies, that the other 4 companies out of the 9, the 5 kind of struggle, where are the 4 companies? What are they doing? What do they look like? What are those like things that, they kind of get a thumbs up from you on? That's like, okay, you are good to grow.
Yeah. So the order of things is they have clearly documented SOPs. Step 1. Not enough. It was just fun. I was talking to a client earlier who was like, I've documented my SOPs. I've given them to everybody. Nothing's changing. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's not the next step. The next step isn't give them to everybody and say, here's the SOPs. That doesn't make them come to life. So the next step after documenting all those SOPs is to ensure that all of those SOPs are woven into your systems, your tools, to make it almost impossible not to follow your SOPs. And this is, as a little side note, one of the things that we work really hard to try to incorporate into software stacks is to say, like, we need to build in these steps and create these required fields and make sure that your workflows in your tech match up with your SOP to make it, like I say, almost impossible for people not to follow the step-by-step process that you've so painstakingly laid out for them. And then the third and non-negotiable item in the order of things is you have to train it slowly and thoroughly. You have to confirm comprehension. When I talk about training it, it's like, you don't just describe what they need to do. You have to describe why they need to do it. You need to then demonstrate. Then you need to have them demonstrate that they know how to do it. Then you need to monitor, and this is the 4th step, which is effective supervision, ensuring that everything is happening as structured. The companies that already have that in place, even, by the way, I always get this question, like, how much detail do I need to put into my SOPs? And I'm like, yeah, quite a lot, but don't be afraid to just start. And of those 4 that were like, hey, you're growth ready, it's not uncommon for them to just have like a 2-page checklist for every phase in the business. We're going to take that typically to the next level, but it's usually not a red light. It's usually just sort of like a yellow light. Like we can grow up into a certain point. Like, you're totally prepared to grow, but while we're now growing, let's work on this stuff and make it more robust. That checklist is great, but let's have some videos and let's have some examples and let's add depth so that the SOP is more trainable or more manageable and things along those lines. That's probably the biggest thing. And then I'll just throw a comma and put there is a hack to SOPs.
Do share.
Yeah, I hate saying this because it is an easy button, but it still has limits, which is that if you have superior leadership, your lack of SOPs will often be covered by your talent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you hire well and mentor well, and everybody in the business just kind of has like learned the right way to do things, even though it's not documented, even though your systems aren't tight, even though you're not training in some formal program, but people are just kind of coming up the XYZ Co way, it is possible to not go hard into systems and processes and kind of hit the easy button with leadership. But I say I hesitate to recommend it, because the truth is any one of those people can get hit by a bus. Any one of them can become disgruntled and quit.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them will be really, really good, and they'll even start their own business and compete with you.
Mm-hmm.
And your business needs to be one that's not dependent on three special people.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's a
think
very dangerous way to grow.
some might argue too that that's the hard way, to find the right, highest quality people. I mean, that's obviously the ideal situation, but finding those people, I was just interviewing somebody the other day talking about how difficult it is to find not only talent to fill the roles, but the right talent. And then, after that, I interviewed somebody else about, okay, now you have this talent. What do you do? I mean, you have to train them. You have to train
right.
leadership into those people. You can't just promote them and expect them to lead the people under them.
100%.
And I think reality is, like, it's hard to want to invest that money into training those leaders, but when it comes down to it, you're really increasing your ability to be efficient, and ultimately increasing your ability to be profitable as a company. So yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I think if it was an easy button, everybody would do it for sure.
Well, it is an easy button insofar as you have the money to attract proven top people
Yeah.
away from their current roles and into your business. And I've seen that done successfully. Now, once you do that, I would strongly urge you to mine them for their genius and get it documented and turn what looks like a superpower into something that we can replicate throughout the organization and ultimately reduce our dependence on, like I say, just that handful of people for all the reasons that I've listed. You need to be building a business that is capable of hiring people with the aptitude and the attitude and make them successful. If you really want to, sustainable, safe growth.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us back to what we started with, was where a business is stalling. Do you think that some of that has to do with, well, the business does just depend on the one person that can sell, or it's dependent on one person? Yeah.
100%. And it's not uncommon. And listen, you do need to have, great people. I don't want the message here to be that you don't need to have great people, but you need to have a machine that if one part fails, that you can interchange it, that you have the ability to interchange it with minimal disruption. But yeah, I absolutely see that. And depending on the size of the organization, it's the owner, right? And then it's the VP of ops and the VP of estimating, right? Like that kind of stuff. Those key people become key person risks, and that's always going to exist to a certain extent. I don't want to tell a story that's and you can eliminate that altogether. I don't think you can eliminate it altogether. You still have to keep awesome people happy to achieve optimal results. But you get my point. I don't need to belabor it.
I totally get where you're coming from. If you were to boil down this idea, or all the things that we've talked about, into one thing that you'd want contractors to take away from this on how they can grow, how they can continue to scale, or how they can set themselves up to scale, I guess would be a better way to say it, what would it be? What's the one takeaway from this?
Build your foundation. Invest in creating financial clarity. Number one, into your financial performance. Number two, into the active performance of every single department in your business. Boil that down to the lagging and leading indicators that you need to always keep your finger on the pulse of. And that will help you to see where you must apply pressure to get the result that you're looking for. Without that clarity, I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to where the first thing that we talk about is, Chad, I'm flying blind. Right. And sometimes that's very metaphorical and not totally true. And we can dig into it and be like, okay, you're just a little freaked out because you can't see this number. And then other times it is spot on. That is no exaggeration, and you are flying all the way blind. And those are the circumstances that I think face, no kidding, face well over 50% of contractors. They're very busy. They're very busy people, and they're owners that didn't really learn how to be owners. And, there's a lot to learn, and you got to surround yourself with the people and the tools, the information that you need to succeed. So if you're there right now, that's what I would invest in. If you're beyond that point, start having fun with SOPs, start having fun with your processes, start really, focusing on being an amazing place to work, focus on how you can create outstanding customer experiences, build an impenetrable, business strategy that has you going to market with differentiators, all this really cool and fun stuff that everybody's excited to work on. Ooh, let's talk about vision. Let's talk about values. Let's talk about, employee recognition. Let's talk about all that type of fun stuff that's really, really cool. None of it matters if you don't have the foundation. That's the message.